I should say, Kersi? What was it?
What?
Kriesi. Kriesi. Voilà. Hello in local dialect. My name's Andy Parkin. I'm here in St.Anton, especially for the film festival. So I presented a film, the one on the Drew we did, and also an exhibition. It's not like I get bored. I like solitude because it seems to me there's always something to do, always something to look at. In the evenings I'd lay with my head out the tent looking at the stars. Fascinating, you know. And then get excited, I'm going climbing again, you know, and things like that. But totally at ease with that. But just to show that I'm not a complete antisocial person, at the end of that period, I'd arranged for 2 porters to come up to my base camp to help me go back down again. I'd gone in with these porters originally, when none of them or me knew the approach. So we all had to discover this together. So that was a really nice thing. And possibly the most impressive moment was in the whole expedition, at the end, they came up, 2 people walking up from a long way away and going, people, at last I see people. And at first you think they're animals. You know, even in a few weeks you can forget what a person looks like and how to speak, how to relate to people. It's really quite intense. So I'm thinking, my God, these people. And then they come and they're going shouting, hey, namaste. And so they come and I'd saved some of the food to feed them. You know, because they were going to sleep at my base camp, got a little tent, I got an extra sleeping bag for the guys. So we shared the last of the food that night, sat around a fire. And that was the best moment of the whole expedition. Because I realized that my experience of solitude was now finished. With the exhibitions and art, I've learned to communicate. Now, before my accident, before I became an artist, I was very quiet as a person. Well, not necessarily quiet, but I mean, but I didn't know how to communicate, or I didn't want to, you know. And even, I was back in Britain a few weeks ago climbing with an old friend. We hadn't climbed together for 35 years. This is the person I went to Alaska in 1978 with, our first expedition. I did my first big wall with him, my first new route in the mountains in Chamonix in 1976. You know, all this guy. And we finally met each other again and we went climbing where we began climbing in Britain. And Pete said to me, because later we went back to my mother's house, you know, so we're there having a cup of tea with my mother and Pete's talking, because she knew him right back then as well, you know. And we were talking, and Pete was talking, because he actually talks a lot more than me. And he was saying to my mother that, yeah, it's really good climbing with Andy again. And I've always felt very safe with him in the mountains climbing, and we shared some really good experiences. And as well, but it's funny climbing again with him now, because before he never used to say anything. And in fact, after 35 years, we didn't stop talking, because you've got all this to catch up on, you know. All that life, what have you done, where have you been, what happened, you know? And that was amazing. So now I've learned to become more verbal, basically, but art taught me that. It's interesting, the learning to communicate through art, which has taught me to talk more with interviews now and present films and be in films. At one time, I didn't want to be in anything like that. I didn't want to communicate the idea of my climbing. It was too close. It still is. I still don't really mediatize it, and that's why I climb solo a lot as well. It's not that I don't like people, it's I like these experiences, and it's easy to organize myself, obviously, as well. And I found that with the accident, art was the only contact I could have with the mountains for a long time, you know, for years. But I would go around the mountains of Chamonix on crutches painting, even sleeping out for 4 days, you know, changing sides of mountains, going up an easy col, looking at the mountains. I used to solo, you know. Now I can't climb them anymore. But I still maintain that contact with the mountains. And then when I began exhibiting, it taught me to communicate again. But in that time of observing mountains as a painter, and even now actually, it's like I understood the structure of mountains more. And above all, it gave me an excuse to stop, sit and look. I think my first new route as a climber, I must have been 16, and I was still at school. And we went into Scotland to an island, the island of Rum, with the geography teacher, we were supposed to go walking, but my friend Kevin and myself, we put the rope and the little bit of gear we had in the rucksacks to hide it, so we'd pretend to go walking, and then we go climbing, and come back at the end of the day. No one ever knew we'd climbed on this island, new routes. Easy ones, you know, maybe grade 4, you know, but we didn't have any equipment as well. So, but the idea was there already, because the way we began climbing was no one showed us. We just left school and went climbing as an alternative to organised sports. So we discovered climbing without climbers. We'd read some books on how to tie knots, and you know, and then later, like I said, reading books like those of Herman Boole and people like that, you know, the motivating books. Which I never imagined we would be doing that sort of thing, you know, but you can't imagine it. But, so it started as like being self-taught. Self-taught means you've got to look and learn, you know. It's not a shortcut, you know, if you do a course in climbing, maybe you don't learn as much. People learn faster now. We learnt very slowly, but I think that's a good thing too, because it teaches you to learn, observe, look. The accident and art taught me to slow down, look at the mountains. It's a bit like going crystal hunting as well. That's another way of going into the mountains and looking, observing and spending lots of time there, you know. Not climbing, because climbing is kind of, you know, well, not for reasons that for security and safety and, you know, practicality. Too many climbers just go and back, particularly in Chamonix, where people try and go from the first cable car up and then back down. Now that restricts people's mentality. What can you climb in a day? And my approach is like, go and spend time in the mountains. Go up and look. Go and try climbs. Maybe you'll fail. Maybe you know you will fail. But the thing is to go and try, because you want that experience. You want to learn. And that's my approach to climbing, and always has been, Always has been. I sometimes think I'm a little bit out of phase with climbing, you know, because of the professionalism and mediatization of the climbing scene in somewhere like Chamonix, and particularly after the accident, I wasn't a climber anymore. Even if I started climbing, you know, new routes, but easy ones and harder, it was like I was on the edge of climbing, you know. Because, like I said, I didn't need to mediatize, I didn't need to do anything. And so, particularly in the mid-90s, I was climbing a lot more with French climbers, and they talked about what we were doing. I didn't, you know. Those same things, you know, that certain climbs I've done that maybe people know. If I'd done them myself or with certain other friends that were more timid, no one would know about them, like routes like Beyond Good and Evil. Mark Twight talked about that. I didn't. We spent nearly 3 years doing it, attempting and doing it together, putting together an idea, you know, new climbs, this creative process I like in climbing, you know, that totally absorbed us, you know, which is a totally different other story as well behind that climb. It's quite a famous climb now. But if I'd done it with another friend who was climbing at the time, Christophe Baudouin, and in that period I did 2 other new routes, which are more dangerous. One is like suicide, a route, much harder than Beyond Good and Evil in a way. No one knows about it, you know, because we didn't talk about it. You need people that do, that are kind of professional or whatever, or at least know how to talk. You know, I didn't then. I didn't care, because I lacked a lot of confidence after my accident. I didn't think I was a climber, even if we're climbing, you know, new routes like that, you know, which are now kind of reference routes, if you like. I didn't think that. For me, it was just a question of getting back into something I love doing. So climbs like Beyond Good and Evil were healing routes. It was part of my progress back to climbing. And funny enough, with that climb, it marked kind of a watershed in my art as well. That year, 1992, when we did it, I was finally climbing, you know, and also a real artist. And then the year after, I went to Patagonia, and there really soloed, you know, and it was like, wow, I've gained. It took 9-10 years to get back to that point, you know, almost, and I'd become me again. And in fact, I went beyond, because there I discovered a capacity in myself, a love for climbing. I'd been reborn, you know, and as well, I'd become an artist. So I was kind of very rich. I've got a means of expression, so it means I can now express myself to you. And I'd got back climbing as well, the love of climbing. Plus it seemed like I'd recovered my body physically, and my mind was even stronger than before the accident, you know. And plus I've got the imagination to see the climbs, to go to places like Patagonia, to the Himalaya, to do new routes. That experience, you know. That was a gift, all that, you know, really, to get that back. And yeah, what can I say? I'm so happy with that, aren't I, you know. And funny enough, that's led me to being here, hasn't it, you know, because if I hadn't have got back into climbing, they wouldn't have filmed me for the Druze, therefore I wouldn't be here. So, you know, comes a circle, isn't it? And, yeah.